Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant. As we know, Elite Dangerous has a number of planned expansions coming up over the years. One of them that I'm most excited about is Planetary landings. So let's take a look at that and have a talk about what it perhaps may involve and all the things we may find ourselves doing once we can get down to planetary surfaces. Now of course Elite already has within it a whole bunch of planets. There's 400 billion star systems and most of those have got multiple planets, dozens in some cases, so there's going to be a lot of places we can go down and visit. Terran planets like the ones we just saw, and at some point gas giants like this. The idea of landing on planets isn't something new by any means. It's got a lot of heritage within the space genre. Elite itself goes back 30 years in history. And in the second iteration of the game, Frontier, we actually got the ability to land on planets. Now, it was very crude, the graphics were very basic, but to be honest, they were advanced back then for their time. We could get down to the planetary surfaces, we could land at spaceports. It was even possible to fly over the planetary surfaces, even though they were mostly flat. They did have some small mountains and hills, as you can see in the background. And it was also possible to do other activities on planets. You could leave mining drones behind that would collect resources and you could come back and pick them up later. And in addition to that, some limited combat was available. At least it was possible you to get shot out of the sky. Now the dream of landing on planets hasn't ended there. This is Rodina. Now I want to take a look at some of the other games that are currently available, or at least some of the other engines, because I think they're going to do a good job of giving us some indication of what we can expect from Elite Dangerous when we can eventually get down to the planetary surfaces. Now Rodina is an indie game. I believe it's made by a very small team. It may even be just one lone guy. I can't quite remember the specifics of that. But what you basically got here is a whole star system that's been modelled with a whole bunch of planets within it, as well as hundreds of asteroids, and you can land on the surfaces of all of these and get out of your ship and walk around. This just goes to show what's possible when you're using procedural generation technology. Some of the planets here actually have an atmosphere, which means you get to have atmospheric re-entry, and that can be a little bit of a challenge and it makes things quite interesting. However, the planets within Rodina all have rocky surfaces. They don't have some of the detail and vibrancy I'd like to expect from a game like Elite. This then is Altera. It models the entire planet Earth, and we've just come in there from orbit and we're getting down a little bit lower here on re-entry. This is one of the Altera trailers. It's actually sped up a little bit, and I've sped up a little bit so we can get a little bit of a look at it without spending too much time. Now, as you can see, what we got here is an entire planetary surface, but not just that. It's mapped with forests, with lakes, with deserts. We've got snowy areas, and we've got beaches. We've got just about everything you can imagine. But it doesn't stop there, because the level of detail here really is quite extraordinary. As you saw, we can come in from the atmosphere, fly over the surfaces here. Now you can see individual trees here, and this is the sort of level of detail I'm hoping Frontier can achieve on their terrain planets, or their Earth-like planets in Elite Dangerous. Everything's modelled here, right down to the individual blade of grass. Just look at that. Now they say variety is a spice of life, don't they? And we're certainly going to want to walk around more varieties of planets than just Earth-likes. This then is Space Engine, and it's got billions and probably trillions of different planets we can look at. These are places that you could only ever dream about visiting. Not only do they have alien landscapes, but just look at the alien skies they've got there. For anyone that has been out exploring in Elite Dangerous for any length of time, they will know that there certainly is enough variety within the game to more than achieve something like this. So we know the variety is certainly possible, and we know the level of detail is certainly possible. Other developers have done it, and I really don't see any reason why Frontier themselves can't do it as well. But the big question is, what are we going to be able to do when we get down on these planets? Here's just some of the things I think are going to be possible, and some of the things that have been mentioned, at least in passing, by Frontier themselves. Now, of course, when you try and get in a planet, or at least get down to a planet's surface, one that's got an atmosphere, you've got atmospheric re-entry to contend with. And that in itself should hopefully be a challenge. You can certainly burn your ship up. You can certainly destroy your ship by doing that in the real world. It's a challenge for astronauts to come back, or in fact to bring anything back into the Earth's atmosphere without totally trashing it. So hopefully that will be one of the first things we notice when we can get inside a planet with an atmosphere. Not to mention, of course, the planets such as gas giants. There was talk at some point that we'd be able to refuel from gas giants, but just think, they have huge storms going on them, extremely volatile. So if we can get on planets like that, that in itself will be something of a challenge. Gas giants have all sorts of gases in their composition. Sometimes these might be rare and unusual compositions, so why not have the ability to get down into those atmospheres and scoop some of those gases up and bring them back for analysis? This would form a part of scientific research, and I think that could be a new career path, couldn't it? And in fact, science could be something that we might need on a number of other planets. There's going to be hopefully animals out there, as well as a lot of other vegetation, a lot of fauna and flora then. And why not have the ability to go out there and collect various samples? Of course, anyone who gets down to a planet is going to want to do some form of missions on there. We've got a load of procedural planets out there. We've got an entire procedural galaxy. So I suspect we'll have some form of procedural missions as well. Now, there is precedence for this in the past. There's a game, quite old now, but still running, still quite successful, may I add, and perhaps one of my most favourite games of the past 15 years or so. And that game is called Anarchy Online. And that game had procedural missions. It was a sci-fi game set in a futuristic world on an alien planet, and the missions were, when they were generated, they would be generated inside either a procedural cave or a building or something like that. The point was that the game generated these on the fly, and I'd like to see something like this done on Elite. Go down to a rocky world and maybe find a mission inside a cave. Go down to a Terran world and, who knows, look inside a forest. Your mission might well be in there. The objective of the mission, well, that's going to be the interesting thing, isn't it? Hopefully it would be something more than fetch quests. But to be quite honest, I would even be happy doing fetch missions if it involved getting down onto a variety of planet surfaces. I know perhaps you'll be doing the same thing over and over again, but just think of all the places you could do it in. In the clip of Space Engine earlier on, there was a big canyon that we could run through. Imagine flying down through one of them in a Sidewinder and trying to land at an awkward spot in order to retrieve something. At the moment in Elite, we've got some fairly basic missions, and I think even they would work quite well in terms of planetary surfaces, but hopefully Frontier will do a little bit of magic and give us a little bit of extra depth with them. The sheer variety of what we could find on a planet's surface would invite at least a little bit of extra depth to missions, I would have thought, wouldn't it? Something that David Braben himself has mentioned quite a number of times is hunting, or what he calls big game hunting down on the planets. He has mentioned dinosaurs more than once, and of course we have seen that in another game more recently. That's coming out on PC and PlayStation 4. So we know that sort of thing certainly is possible. And I do believe David first mentioned that back in the Kickstarter in 2012. So that was before we saw anything involving No Man's Sky. So I'm sure Frontier shouldn't be accused of copying anything in that regards. Now, this is something I'd absolutely love to see within the game. Being given a mission at some sort of far-reaching outpost, or in fact some rich guy at Earth saying, I want a dinosaur from some far-off planet 1,000 light years from here. And of course you're sent off on your way to go and retrieve him, his prized pet, the thing he's always most wanted. And perhaps we'll need some sort of specialised cargo hold to bring that back, not to mention the skills needed to try and take such a beast down. Exploration really is the biggie for me. I love exploring in Elite as it is, and I'm a bit of a nature freak. I like to go out and explore forests. I love to go out and climb mountains and do a lot of things like that. Spend a lot of time doing that whenever I get the chance to do it. Now, if that can be included in Elite, if we can go into forests and caves and canyons, valleys, forests and beaches. That in itself would be absolutely huge to me. And maybe, who knows, we can bring back photographs or something like that of our adventures out there. But I know personally I could just spend days exploring a single terrain-like planet, especially if we get the variety of surfaces that we could imagine when combining something like the detail of our Terra with the sheer scope of something like Space Engine. And we know that Elite has that. I would suspect I'm not alone with wanting something like that, because obviously there are a lot of people that go out exploring the galaxy currently, and to be honest, the gameplay in that regards is fairly limited, should we say, in terms of what Elite actually offers us. The great side of it is the scope of what we actually get to see when we're out there, so more of that would be awesome. I mentioned atmospheric re-entry as one of the first points of something we could do, or that would be needed when we go into planetary surfaces. Now, just imagine we're flying through the atmosphere of a planet, we're up in the sky. Imagine doing combat up there. A whole new level of combat would be needed. You'd have gravity to contend with for starters, as well as things you can collide with, such as the ground. I'd certainly like to see a lot of PvP, as well as combat against NPCs, and perhaps if the new arena combat is anything to go by, maybe we can get some maps on planetary surfaces at some point. Combat would take a dramatic turn once we can get down to even the most basic of planets, moons and planets with rocky surfaces. Just think of the things that could be possible there. Not to mention, it opens up the possibility of other types of combat, such as bombing runs and scout missions, espionage, and all sorts of other things like that. And I'd just like to give a quick shout out to Mobius, who allowed me to use all these Elite themed images he created. You can see them on the Frontier forums, and I'll provide a link below. Right at the start of the video I mentioned mining. That is something that was possible in Frontier. I distinctly remember purchasing mining drones or mining robots, and you'd take these, you'd carry these in your Sidewinder and your Cobra or whatever ship you actually had, and you'd take them down to a planetary surface and you'd find a suitable location, and then you'd leave the drone there to do its job, and you'd come back maybe days later, maybe weeks later, and collect the little robot along with its whole new collection of ores that it had got for you, and you could take these back to a station to sell. Now, I'm not sure how far Frontier will allow us to go in terms of automation and leaving things behind, but that's something I'd love to see. We perhaps could be limited to the amount of things we could drop off, the amount of drones we could drop off, but if we could leave a few of them behind at various planets, we'd have a whole bunch of things going on. The resource collectors in Star Wars Galaxies would do something a little bit like that, didn't they? And I don't see any reason why Frontier shouldn't allow us to do something like that. But at the very least, I think we should be able to get down to those planetary surfaces and do a little bit of manual mining. Even that would be something nice to see, especially if some of these unusual planets had some very rare resources. Now, in the far future of the game's development, assuming Elite gets that far, I don't see this coming up anytime soon. Hopefully one day we can see fully fledged cities down on some of these planets. We can already see the city lights from space, from orbit. Just imagine getting down there and being able to walk around cities. Now, it might make you wonder how Frontier could make so many cities. There are some videos out there on YouTube showing procedural city generation. Are Frontiers the master of procedural generation enough to allow them to do something like that? Well, only time will tell, won't it? But, you know, my hopes are quite high in that regard. I certainly think they are more than up to the task. So that's a rather hopeful and perhaps a bit imaginative look at what might be possible when we can get down to planetary surfaces. And indeed, there's probably a whole bunch of things I haven't even thought of. Let me know what it is you'd like to do down on planets. Do you think it's possible we'll even be able to get down to planets? Maybe it's something that'll never happen. Although I think there's a good chance it is coming. David Bravens said as recently as E3 that it's going to come. But the question is, just how good is it going to be? So let me know your thoughts on what you think of all that. My hope is that it really isn't too far in the future. Let's see what Frontier's announcement is going to be at Gamescom. I doubt very much that it'll be planetary landings, but you know what? You never know. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.